Everybody, I believe Americans tend to have a difficulty saying the proper names for private body parts out loud because we were never really conditioned to do so. Um, I'm from Tennessee. I grew up in Memphis, and my sexual education was minimal, if any. I vaguely remember there being like a section in the fifth grade about sex. We like went into the science room, science lab, and had a very brief discussion about STDs and pregnancy. And that was one day, and that was that. And then, none of us had even hit puberty yet, but there was no further discussion. And we're not taught these words. I remember being in the fifth grade was the first time I learned the word vagina. And, that's sad. That's a very, half the people in the world are women. And so half the people in the world have a vagina, and I don't know anything about that at a certain age. And it's bizarre. It's frustrating because, I grew up where I did, and I grew up gay. So like, not only did I not have the education or the resources to learn about what was true about me or sex in general, I also knew that once I had hit puberty and we were starting to have these discussions, I was already in the repressive state where I was like, I'm not like y'all. I'm not allowed to ask questions about my life. I'm not allowed to ask questions about my sex. I'm going to learn this in the hard way on my own and Google it and find porn and things that don't really teach you about sex. They just acknowledge sex in probably a negative light. And I believe that these two articles are related in a similar way. Like, the unfortunate circumstance of children not being educated on terminology and not being familiar with sex and what sex is and how it's used and what it does and the benefits and the pros and cons and the potential consequences of sex, like all of that is so important. And to wait to have those conversations until, you've already recorded a video of a really terrible thing happening, it's a little late. And I personally believe that if we were able to have conversations comfortably with young people before they hit puberty, before these weird urges and these like misunderstood ideas of sex are already happening, we can get ahead of that and have people, children, young adults, more educated on what it is that they're about to embark upon. And I mean, I wish that I had a place to go to say, hey, so I'm a little different and I want to ask about sex because I'm not really finding anything for myself. And to not have that, I put myself in situations where if I wanted to learn about sex, I had to go to less than trustworthy sources because I was ignorant to a lot of that. And I put myself in situations where I felt comfortable in situations where I should not have been. And if I had had a parent or a teacher or a confidant in any way that I felt was a safe place to go and have these discussions, it would have prevented me from learning the hard way. And I think that's true for the Steubenville situation. As awful as it was, all of those kids deserved a better education to understand what was going on. For all of them to sit there and look at it and to think that it was okay enough to record, okay enough to watch, okay enough not to intervene is indicative of the fact that they just did not know to the degree of what was happening. And that I blame on the people responsible for them to understand that. Adults and teachers, counselors, whomever. So they're definitely related. You can't blame someone for not knowing what they don't know, even if what they don't know puts them in a really, really compromising position. Accountability is one thing, but like, give the kids a chance, teach them about this stuff. Society, to change this, I believe, needs to invest in the education of younger and younger people, starting with, elementary, middle school, like before puberty. Setting people up for success in these situations is the best case scenario. Letting people know that this is a problem and this is a way you can educate yourself to once you come upon these circumstances of sexuality and puberty and all of that. If you're equipped with an understanding of consent, if you're equipped with an understanding of terminology and your body and their body, then there's a lot of that like gray area that's kind of removed. And then you're just at least a little better equipped to have that conversation with the other person when you're having these interactions. You know what you're actually discussing versus just knowing what sex is and knowing that it's a conquest or that it's a transaction or that it's a pregnancy scare. Like, there's so much more nuance to it that I think is left out. And once you're already thrusted into the depths of sexual puberty and all of that, it's a little hard to backtrack and to reestablish some of what you're supposed to understand about sex. And I do believe that if we start educating people more thoroughly with terminology and helping them understand that men and women are equal in a consent conversation and not relying on women to consent to sexual transactions, and helping them understand that they're equally as valuable in this and that their no and his no are the same, and that if they can get on the same page, it can be a safe, fun, really great thing. But without all of that information, without all of that knowledge in the current society, it's going to be rough.